The scrapyard was quiet, with nothing but the wind whispering through metal ruins. Dax Gray walked through the maze of broken ships, his boots crunching over shattered glass and rusted panels. He wasn't looking for anything special, just cheap spare parts for resale. Then he saw it. A rusted, ugly freighter tucked behind piles of garbage, half buried in dirt. It looked forgotten, like no one had touched it in years. The paint was chipped off, the door half open, and one of its engines was missing. Most would have walked past it. But Dax saw value in junk. He grinned. Old girls probably hiding some usable systems, he muttered. He made the deal in minutes. The yard owner was shocked anyone even wanted that wreck. Dax got it for almost nothing. He thought he'd made a great bargain, but he had no idea what he was about to uncover. Later that night, Dax brought the ship to his repair bay on the edge of the trade colony. A rain fell hard as he powered open the main cargo hatch, the metal groaning like it hadn't moved in years. Inside was dark, dusty, and smelled like old oil. He turned on his flashlight, stepping carefully inside. Broken crates lay scattered. Wires hung from the ceiling. As he took another step, he paused. There was a sound soft like breathing. Dax froze. The ship was supposed to be empty. He shone the light around, aiming at the shadows. Nothing. He moved forward, heart beating faster. Then something shifted behind a crate. Dax raised the light and gasped. A pair of glowing blue eyes stared back at him from the darkness. A small figure crouched there, shaking. It was a girl. Maybe 10 years old by human standards, but clearly not human. Her skin was a soft violet, and her hair shimmered with silver strands. She looked thin, scared, and dirty, hazy. Dax said gently, "I'm not going to hurt you." The girl didn't answer, only backed away, clutching something to her chest. A sudden creak made Dax spin around. Another figure stepped out of the shadows, taller, but limping, an adult alien woman. Weak and holding her side, she raised a trembling hand, voice barely a whisper. "Please, don't hurt my daughter." Dax blinked in shock. He hadn't expected this. Two stowaways, hiding in a ship that was supposed to be garbage. He looked at the woman. Her face was tired, hollow, but protective. He lowered his flashlight. "What are you doing here?" he asked quietly. The woman took a slow breath. "Hiding." Dax frowned. "From who?" "From everyone," she said, her eyes filled with fear. Her daughter stepped beside her now, gripping her hand tightly. The scene was quiet, fragile. Dax stood there, unsure what to do. They weren't armed, weren't dangerous, just scared. "Have you been living in this ship?" he asked. The woman nodded. "Since the war." That hit Dax like a punch. He'd heard rumors of entire colonies being wiped out, races scattered, families torn apart, and now two survivors were standing in front of him, hiding in metal ruins. "Why not ask for help?" he asked. The woman's eyes watered. "Because they'll take her." Dax didn't speak, but he understood. The child there was something about her, something others might want. He didn't ask more, not yet. Instead, he sighed and said, "You need food and rest." The woman blinked, confused. "You're not turning us in?" Dax shook his head. "Not yet, at least," he said with a faint smile. The child tilted her head, as if trying to read him for the first time. She stepped forward and held out a small, round object. It was a broken necklace, but it had a symbol Dax didn't recognize. "You saved us," she said softly. Dax didn't feel like a hero. He just felt like a man who'd bought an old ship and found two lives hiding inside it. And now, his simple plan for spare parts had turned into something far more dangerous. And far more important, he turned toward the ship's interior. "If you're staying here," he said, "we'll need to fix this old girl up." The woman looked at him carefully. "My name is Sierra, and I'm Dax," he replied. "Let's see what we're working with," as he walked deeper into the ship. Sierra and her daughter followed slowly behind, and for the first time in a long while, they didn't feel alone. Dax sat on a cracked seat in the ship's cockpit, watching the rain outside blur the colony lights. The ship groaned with every gust of wind, its frame barely holding together. Behind him, Sierra stood silently, holding her daughter close. He didn't ask questions right away. He just handed her a steaming cup of synth tea, and waited. She accepted it with shaky hands, her alien fingers trembling against the warm metal. The child Luma sat on the floor beside her mother, still quiet, still alert. It was the girl's eyes that bothered Dax, not because they were strange, but because they held pain far too deep for her age. "I didn't think anyone was alive in that ship," Dax said finally, his voice low. "You weren't supposed to," Sierra whispered. "Then why stay?" he asked. "It's falling apart." Sierra looked down at her cup, the steam fogging her face for a second. "It's forgotten," she said. "And forgotten places are safer than busy ones." Dax leaned back in his chair, frowning. "But why not come forward, ask for asylum, get help?" Sierra met his eyes, and for the first time, Dax saw the sharpness behind her gentle tone. "They'd take her," she said, nodding toward Luma. "Who would?" Dax asked. "Now?" "Serious, everyone," she replied, without hesitation. "The Syndicate, the Warlords. Maybe even the Alliance." Dax rubbed his temples. "What makes her so special?" There was a pause. Sierra took a deep breath, as if deciding how much truth to give. "My daughter is more than just a child," she said slowly. "She's proof of something they want to erase." Dax leaned forward. "Proof of what?" Sierra hesitated, then stood and walked over to a metal crate. She opened it carefully, revealing a damaged silver device wrapped in old cloth. It looked like a data core, but it pulsed with soft blue light. "This," she said, "is part of what they're hunting." Dax blinked. "What is it?" "It's an ancient memory core from our Planet 1. Of the last that wasn't destroyed," Sierra replied, "and she's bonded to it." Luma slowly stood and walked to her mother, placing a hand on the device. It glowed brighter, responding to her touch. "She doesn't just carry our history," Sierra said, voice cracking. "She is the last living key to it." Dax felt the weight of her words. He wasn't dealing with simple refugees. He had a living symbol of a dead civilization in his garage. Suddenly, the decision to help them felt far more dangerous. "They'll come for her eventually," Dax said quietly. Sierra nodded. "They always do." "Then why tell me?" he asked. "Why trust me?" Sierra looked him in the eye, her voice firm. "Because you didn't report us," she said. "You gave us tea." That simple truth hit harder than any complex reason could. In a galaxy full of betrayal, small kindness was more powerful than promises. Dax stood and began pacing the cockpit. "If they find you here, they'll assume I'm helping you." "You are helping us," Sierra said softly. "That's not the point," Dax muttered, running a hand through his hair. "You could leave," Sierra said suddenly, her tone cold now. "We wouldn't stop you." Luma looked up at him with wide, tired eyes. Dax froze. "I'm not leaving," he said finally. "I just need to know what I'm getting into." "You're getting into a storm," Sierra replied. "One that never ends." Dax laughed. "Bitterly story of my life." He turned to look at Luma again. "She really understands that core." "She was born understanding it," Sierra said. "My mate was a scientist. One of the last who worked on preserving our culture before the bombing started. And he's gone." Sierra nodded, her face hardening. "They killed him when she was a baby," she said. "Tried to take her too, so you ran." "We've been running ever since." Dax looked around the cracked walls of the freighter. "This ship's not going to last much longer," he said. "It doesn't need to," Sierra replied. "We'll leave before it collapses." "Where will you go?" She didn't answer. Because she didn't know, neither did Dax. But something In his gut told him he wouldn't let them leave alone. "You can stay here for now," he said after a pause. "But if we're going to keep you safe, this place needs upgrades." He walked to the console, tapping in some old commands, and "That means I need to know if that memory core can power anything else." Luma stepped forward and placed her hand on the console. It blinked, and for the first time in years, the ship's dead systems hummed softly. Dax turned slowly, staring at her. "Well," he muttered, "that's new." Sierra let out a small laugh, dry, tired, but real. "She's full of surprises," she said. Dax nodded, staring at the glowing lights coming back to life, "and I've got a feeling the galaxy isn't ready for any of them." The freighter was alive again, not fully, but enough to feel like more than just a metal shell. Lights flickered to life in corridors that hadn't seen power in years. Old consoles blinked and buzzed, reacting to Luma's touch like they remembered. Her Dax watched her closely, both amazed and uneasy. "Kid," he said softly, "what are you?" The girl didn't answer, only placed her hand on another panel. The ship's internal map lit up in front of her, showing systems Dax hadn't even accessed yet. Sierra stood behind her daughter, arms crossed. "She's not a weapon," she said, reading Dax's expression. "She's also not just a kid," Dax replied. "Ships don't just obey children unless something big is going on." Sierra gave a slow nod, eyes fixed on the glowing interface. "My people were once connected to machines in a different way," she said. "Organic tech, we didn't build it. We grew it." Dax raised an eyebrow. "And your daughters?" "The result of that? Her father was a bioengineer," Sierra said, her voice heavy with memory. "He gave her the ability to speak to things like this ship. Things long dead to most. She's waking them up," Dax murmured, watching as new lights flickered on deeper into the hull. "She's waking up more than just the ship," Sierra whispered, barely audible. Dax turned sharply. "What do you mean?" Sierra stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Luma carries a genetic sequence coded into her DNA's knowledge that should have been lost in the war." Dax frowned. "What kind of knowledge?" "The kind that ends empires," she said coldly. Dax leaned against the bulkhead, heart pounding. "I thought I was just saving 2 stowaways," he said, shaking his head. "You saved the last known heir to a lost civilization," Sierra replied, "and that makes you dangerous now." 2. Before Dax could respond, the ship beeped. A warning flashed on the screen, a signal pinging from orbit. Unidentified ship. Approaching stealth mode engaged, Dax's fingers flew across the controls. "It's not from the colony," he said. "Who the hell's flying without a beacon?" Sierra's face turned pale. "They found us." Dax stood up straight, adrenaline kicking in. "How fast can we move this junkyard bird?" Luma didn't speak, she just touched the console again. The engines coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. The whole ship shuddered as if shaking off years of sleep. Systems came online, one after another. Dax stared at her. "She's doing this." "She always could," Sierra whispered, "but she was too scared before." "Not anymore," Dax muttered. Running to the pilot's seat, he strapped in. Checking systems, half of them were still red, but the engines were green. "Good enough," he looked back at them. "Strap in, we're not staying here." The ship rumbled as it lifted off the ground, breaking through the colony's stormy sky behind them. Lights from the approaching vessel grew larger on the radar. Dax pushed the throttle, and the old freighter shot forward like it hadn't aged a day. "They're chasing us," Sierra said, watching the screen. "Then we keep running," Dax snapped. "Adjusting flight patterns." "No," Luma said suddenly, her voice steady for the first time. Dax turned. "Know what? They're not chasing us to kill us," she said softly. "They want to control me." The way she said it, like she knew more than any child, should have gave Dax chills. "How do you know that?" he asked. She looked down. "Because I can hear their ship." Dax froze. You're linked to them too. Not fully, Luma said, but their systems. They speak the same language. Dax leaned forward, eyes wide. Then maybe you can jam them. Slow them down. Luma nodded. I'll try. She placed her hand on the panel again, and the ship groaned deeply. Lights flickered across the screen as the pursuing vessels suddenly blinked out of radar. Did they cloak? Dax asked. No, Luma said quietly. I made them stop seeing us. Sierra stared at her daughter with awe. You've never done that before? I didn't. No, I could, Luma whispered, her fingers trembling. Dax pulled the freighter into deep orbit, hiding behind a large moon. They were safe for now. But Dax knew this was just the beginning. He turned to Sierra. There's no going back now. I never thought there would be, she replied. Dax sighed and leaned back. What's the plan now? He asked. We need to find someone who still believes in what my people stood for, Sierra said. And who would that be? Sierra looked at him, then down at Luma. Anyone brave enough to protect a child that carries the last hope of an empire. Dax looked at Luma small, shaking, yet powerful in a way he didn't fully understand. And something inside him made a decision. I guess that means me, he said, smiling bitterly. Sierra didn't smile, but her eyes softened. You may be the only one left who will. The freighter drifted in silence behind the dark side of a moon. The stars above flickered through the cockpit glass, peaceful, but inside the ship, tension grew thick like smoke. Dax stared at the radar screen, watching the red blip that hovered in orbit nearby. The enemy ship hadn't moved in 20 minutes, but that didn't mean they were gone. It meant they were waiting. They know we're still out here, Dax whispered. Sierra stood beside him, arms folded tightly. They won't fire blindly. Not with Luma aboard, she said. Dax glanced back at the girl who sat quietly near the engine room. She was sketching something with her finger on the dusty floor patterns. Symbols, nothing random. What is she drawing? Dax asked. Sierra didn't answer right away. She says it's the ship's memory. Dax didn't know what that meant, but deep inside, he was starting to understand that this wasn't just a child. They were dealing with something ancient, something alive in a way no machine should be. He rubbed his hands over his face, exhausted. This isn't what I signed up for, he muttered. No one signs up to carry someone else's burden, Sierra said quietly. But some still carry it anyway. Suddenly, the radar beeped. Dax looked up. The red blip had split into two. Another enemy ship had arrived. Both were closing in slowly. Surrounding the moon from opposite angles, they're forming a trap, Dax said. Jumping to the pilot's seat. They don't want to destroy us, Sierra said. They want to capture. Dax tightened his grip on the controls. Then they're gonna be disappointed. He powered up the engines. But the ship's systems hesitated. Too old. Too slow. We need more time, he said, frustration rising. We don't have it, Sierra replied, looking toward Luma. The girl stood and walked toward them, her eyes glowing faintly now. I can distract them, she said calmly. Dax turned in his chair. What do you mean? I can speak to their systems just long enough to buy us a way out. Sierra moved fast, grabbing her daughter's hand. No, you don't have to do that. But Luma looked up at her mother. Her voice soft but firm. If we don't, they'll take us anyway. Dax nodded. What do you need from me? Just fly, she said, then turned and placed both palms on the control panel. The ship's lights flickered, and a low hum filled the air, different this time, deeper, like a song rising from the walls. Outside, both enemy ships began to slow. There comes burst with static, then silence. Their scanners failed one after another. Their lights flickered like blinking eyes in the dark. Luma's body trembled, sweat beading on her forehead. But she didn't stop. Sierra knelt beside her, whispering soothing words. Dax didn't wait. He yanked the throttle and shot the ship out from behind the moon. The engines groaned, but held. The freighter sped through open space, dodging debris, sliding between scanner zones. Alarms wailed as the enemy ships tried to recover control, but it was too late. Luma finally collapsed into her mother's arms. Breathing hard, Dax checked the radar. No pursuit yet. "We're in the clear," he said, panting. "For now." Sierra replied, cradling her daughter. Dax looked at her. "How long can she keep doing this?" "I don't know," Sierra whispered, brushing Luma's hair back gently. "She's never had to push this hard before." The ship drifted into an asteroid belt nearby. Dax turned off the engines, using rocks to block any scanner signals. "We'll hide here for a while," he said. "Let her rest." Sierra nodded. But her eyes were distant, worried. "She's strong," Dax said, trying to offer comfort. "She's just a child," Sierra whispered, "but they'll treat her like a weapon." Dax looked at her, serious now. "Then we don't let them." That night, while Sierra and Luma slept near the engine heat vents, Dax sat alone in the cockpit. He stared at the stars, thinking about his quiet life before all this, a lonely mechanic on the edge of space, salvaging trash to survive, and now he was flying a half-dead ship with a living alien artifact and a girl who could bend machines to her will. He wasn't sure how this happened, but he knew why he kept going. Because for the first time in a long time, someone needed him, and that meant something. Suddenly, a quiet alert flashed on the screen. Dax leaned forward. Another signal. Faint. Nearby, not an enemy. A beacon, a distress call from an old Alliance satellite. He narrowed his eyes, thinking, maybe there was someone out there who could help. Someone who still remembered the old wars. Someone who could protect the girl better than he could alone. Or maybe 'twas another trap. Either way, Dax knew one thing. They couldn't run forever. The stars drifted slowly by as the ship floated in silence. The asteroid field shielded them from scanners, giving them time to breathe. But peace never lasted long in space. Dax leaned over the console, studying the beacon's data again. The distress signal wasn't strong, but it was real. An old Alliance satellite forgotten by most, still broadcasting. It could be a trap. But it could also be a lead. He glanced back toward the engine room, where Sierra gently stroked Luma's hair as the child rested. They had survived another attack, but barely, and the girl's strength was fading. "We need help," Dax whispered to himself. He stood and walked quietly back, trying not to wake. Then Sierra looked up anyway, tired but alert. "We're moving again?" she asked. Soon, Dax replied, "There's a signal load Alliance tech." Sierra's eyes narrowed. "They abandoned us when the war began." "I know," Dax said, "but the Alliance wasn't one voice, was many." "Most of them are gone," she replied softly. "Or bought. Then maybe this is the last good one left," he said. "Or maybe it's just a relic." Luma stirred in her sleep, her hand twitching slightly. Sierra looked down and adjusted the blanket over her. "She's growing faster now," Sierra whispered, "not just in body, but in connection." Dax sat on the floor beside them, arms on his knees. "Connection to what?" "To everything," Sierra said, looking toward the walls, the ship, the systems around us. "Even signals passing through space. She's like a living antenna," Dax muttered. "No, she's the core," Sarah corrected. "She doesn't just receive, she understands." Dax let the silence settle between them before speaking again. "You said something once," he said, "about knowledge buried in her DNA, something worth killing for." Sierra looked at him, her face unreadable. Dax leaned forward. "I need to know. Sierra, I need the truth, or I can't protect her." Sierra sighed deeply, then spoke. "Our people were not just warriors or farmers, we were builders of minds," she said. "We created thinking machines that grew like vines and lived like forests. Our leaders weren't chosen by war or politics," she continued. They were chosen by the machines. And Luma Dax asked, "She's one of them. She's the last," Sierra said quietly. "The machines chose her before." They were destroyed. They marked her with everything they knew: maps, codes, alliances, secrets. And warnings. Dax shook his head slowly. "So inside, that child is an entire civilization." "Yes, and the people chasing her. They want to extract that knowledge or erase it completely," Sierra said. "They fear what she remembers, even though she doesn't know she remembers it." "Exactly." Dax stood up. Pacing the metal floor, his thoughts raced. A child carrying the ghost of a fallen empire. An empire that had once bent machines to its will not. With wires, but with thought. And now that legacy lived in the body of a girl no one wanted. Except him. He looked toward the cockpit window, where the stars glowed like silent eyes. "We go to the satellite," he said finally. "It could be a trap," Sierra reminded him. "Everything is," he replied. "But hiding won't save her either." By morning, the ship's engines warmed again. Dax piloted through the edge of the asteroid field, avoiding large fragments. Luma stood behind him silently, holding onto a rail. "You okay?" he asked without turning. "Yes," she said softly. "I dreamed of the satellite." Dax blinked. "You what?" "It's not empty," she said. "There's someone there." "Alive?" She nodded, waiting. As the ship neared the signal, the satellite came into view. It was larger than expected, half station, half beacon. Old metal panels floated around it like broken armor. A docking bay light blinked, green and steady. "They're inviting us in," Dax said, "to clean." Sierra murmured, "Someone." Maintained it. They docked carefully. Weapons ready, the doors hissed open, revealing a long corridor covered in vines. Strange. Glowing moss clung to the wall's organic tech. "Not human-made," Sierra gasped, stepping forward. "This is our design," she whispered, "but it's been hidden for decades." Luma walked. Ahead of them, drawn by something unseen, she moved without fear. They followed her through twisted corridors until they entered a wide chamber circular, filled with pulsing lights and humming panels. At the center stood a figure in a cloak, tall, hooded, unmoving. "You came," the figure said, voice smooth and ancient. Dax stepped forward, tense. "Who are you?" "I am the warden," the figure replied, "protector of the last library." Sierra stepped forward in disbelief. "We thought the libraries were destroyed." "Not all," the warden said. "Some chose to hide, waiting for the return of the one chosen." He turned to Luma and knelt. "You are the memory of our people," he said, "and now, it is time you remember." Dax felt something shift in the air. Luma blinked, her eyes lit with patterns he'd never seen before. Stars, maps, codes, all dancing in her gaze. And at that moment, Dax realized this wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was the rebirth of a lost empire, and he had become its guardian. The chamber inside the ancient satellite was silent. Dax could barely breathe as he watched Luma. Her small body stood still, but her eyes glowed like galaxies. Symbols moved across her iris's maps, codes, languages long forgotten. The warden knelt before her, eyes full of reverence. Sierra stood beside her daughter, tears running down her cheeks. "This is what her father died to protect," she whispered. "She's awakening." The warden said softly, "And once she remembers, no one will be able to stop her." But Dax didn't feel peace. He felt watched. His hand moved to his hip, gripping the old blaster under his coat. Something felt wrong, too easy, too perfect. He turned to the hallway they came from, shadows, twitching at the edges. "Who else is here?" he muttered under his breath. Just then, the lights flickered and a new sound echoed through the chamber. Boots, multiple pairs, marching in sync. Sierra turned fast, pulling Luma close. Dax stepped in front of them, gun drawn from the entrance. A group of armored soldiers emerged, weapons aimed and ready. Leading them was a familiar face, Captain Morrell. Dax's old friend, the one who once owed him his life. Dax's heart sank. "You followed us," he growled. Morrell smiled, cold and smug. "No, I waited," he said. "You led us right to her." Sira stepped forward. Fury in her eyes. "You were supposed to help him." "I did," Morrell said. "I helped him walk straight into destiny, and now I'll take what's mine." Dax aimed his blaster. "You're not touching her." Morrell raised his own weapon. "You sure about that, Dax?" The warden didn't move. He stared at Morrell, eyes narrowing. "You do not belong in this place," he said, voice deeper now. Morrell chuckled. "Oh, I belong wherever Prophet lives." Luma trembled beside her mother, but didn't hide. Instead, she took a step forward and raised her hand. The lights in the chamber flickered again, then dimmed. The symbols in her eyes pulsed, and the walls began to glow. "She's activating the defense systems," the warden said quickly. "Stop her," Morrell shouted. Now the soldiers rushed forward, but the floor shifted beneath them. A pulse of energy knocked them back. One hit the wall. Another was disarmed by an unseen force. Luma didn't scream. She didn't run. She simply moved her hand slowly, and the machines obeyed her. The walls opened to reveal ancient turrets. Humming with power, "Stand down," Dax shouted. "You have no idea what you're messing with." Morrell backed up, his men groaning in pain. "This wasn't the deal," he spat. Dax took a step forward. "There was never a deal. There was just your greed." Morrell aimed his weapon at Luma. "Give her to me, or we all die here." Before he could fire, Sira moved like a shadow, grabbing a blade from her belt and throwing it. It struck his shoulder hard enough to drop his gun. Dax tackled him to the ground as the turret spun toward the soldiers. "Tell them to drop their weapons," Dax hissed into his ear. Morrell groaned. "They won't listen to me anymore." "Then you're more useless than I thought," Dax growled, slamming his fist into his face. The warden stepped forward, placing a hand on Luma's shoulder. "She has chosen to defend this place," he said, "and the machines have accepted her." The remaining soldiers backed away slowly, weapons shaking. Dax stood, blood on his knuckles, breathing hard. Luma turned to him. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head. "Not really." She nodded, then whispered something to the wall. The turrets retracted, the lights softened, but the warning was clear. This was her domain now. Sira helped Dax to his feet. "You trusted him," she said quietly. "I didn't know he was that far gone," Dax replied, "but now I do." The warden looked around the chamber, then addressed them all. "Now the question is, what will you do with her?" Dax didn't hesitate. "Protect her," he said. "With everything I've got," Sira looked at him, eyes softening. "And guide her," she added, "because the next part of her journey will be harder." Luma walked forward and touched Dax's hand. "Thank you," she said softly. "You didn't run." He knelt down and smiled. "Running's not really my thing anymore." Behind them, Morrell lay unconscious, his greed defeated, but outside the station, far beyond the satellite scanners, another ship waited. Not one of war, but one of royalty. A signal blinked. Quietly in the void, the child has awakened. And somewhere across the stars, someone whispered, "It's time to bring her home." The station hung in space like a glowing ember, silent, wounded, but still alive inside. Dax stood near the control panel, bruised and tired. Luma sat beside him, her eyes dim now, the ancient glow flickering. She had given everything to defend them, and it showed. Sira held her close, whispering soft words in her language. But they all knew this wasn't over. A new signal echoed through the station, a royal code. The warden looked up from his console, his voice low and grim. "A fleet is coming." Dax stepped forward. "Whose fleet?" "Her people's enemies." the warden replied. The ones who destroyed the Empire now want to erase what's left on the screen. The enemy fleet appeared, 10 ships. Sleek, black, armed. To the teeth, Dax's heart pounded. They had no warship, no army, no chance. But he wasn't planning to surrender, not after all they'd been through. They tracked the awakening signal, Sarah said, tightening her grip on Luma's hand. She's a beacon now. Luma opened her eyes slowly. Her voice soft. I can stop them. Dax knelt beside her, shaking his head. No, you've done enough. I can speak to the machines on their ships, she said, but I need time. The warden walked to a central platform, ancient. Lights glowing at his feet. This station can buy you that time, he said. But only if someone stays to guide it, I'll do it. Dax said without thinking. Sarah turned fast, eyes wide. No. Dax smiled, tired, but calm. You two have a future. You've got knowledge, bloodlines, memory, he said. Me. I'm just the guy who bought a ship. Luma stepped forward and placed her small hand on his arm. You are more than that, she said. You were the first to protect me. The warden activated the defense grid, huge satellite arms extended outward. Glowing with old power, they will attack in minutes, he said. Once they know she is here. Dax looked at the stars, the fleet closing in. All right, he muttered. Let's show them what one broken ship and one stubborn human can do. Sarah moved toward him. You won't survive this. Dax shrugged. Maybe not, but you will. He looked at Luma and smiled. You have everything they fear. Kid, and that means everything worth fighting for. Outside, the lead enemy ship opened fire. Lasers streaked through space, slamming into the station's shield. The whole place shook, but the defense grid held. Dax gripped the controls, sweat on his brow. Let's give M hell. He rerouted power to the cannons, targeting the closest ship. A blast of plasma fired from the station. Striking true, one of the enemy ships spun out. Smoking, alarms blared, lights flashed, but Dax kept going. Another blast, another hit. But then impact, an explosion rocked the chamber, sparks flying across the ceiling. Systems flickered, power dropping fast. They're focusing fire. The warden shouted. Dax grinned. Good means I got their attention, far below. Sarah led Luma to the ancient memory core. The child placed both hands on the glowing surface and closed her eyes. The machines within her responded, singing silently across the stars. Her voice wasn't just Code Itoi's command. She reached out through the void, speaking to the enemy ships. And one by one, their systems began to fail. The lead vessel blinked, slowed, and stopped. Then another, and another. Their crews scrambled to understand, controls locked. Weapons disabled, Luma whispered. You're not welcome here. Her power grew, surging outward, turning their strength into silence, back in the control room. Dax looked at the radar in disbelief. There. Stopping, he said. The warden nodded, watching with quiet awe. She's overriding their systems from the inside. Dax let out a breath and slumped into the chair. She did it, but then one ship remained, larger than the rest, old. And scarred, its tech different. She can't reach it, the warden said. That ship is pre-network manual control. It charged a massive cannon. Aimed at the memory chamber. If it fires, everything ends. Dax stood again. Face grim. Then I guess I've got one last job. He manually targeted the station's core laser, something never used in decades. You can't, the warden warned. That cannon draws all power. Dax smiled. Then, let's make it count. He fired. A beam of white energy ripped through space, striking the enemy ship just as its own weapon lit up. The blast tore it apart, the explosion brighter than any star. The shockwave hit the station systems blue. Metal cracked, and everything went dark. Later, When the lights returned, the station floated silently. Luma awoke beside the core, her mother holding her tightly. The warden stood nearby, solemn. "He did it," he said softly. "The humans saved the last of us." Outside the window, space was clear again. The enemy fleet had fled or been disabled, and in the heart of the galaxy, a new signal pulsed, gently carrying hope. Luma walked to the control room, now empty. She placed her hand where Dax once stood. "I'll never forget you," she whispered.